What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Goosenov Show. So today, I have more of a, how would you say it? An opinion-based piece about the current state of popular engineering. So there's a rise in, I don't know, it's kind of a semantic thing, but I think it probably hits on something deeper. But there's a rise in people, or a group of people who are engineers or hobbyists that are calling themselves makers. I'm a maker. I'm a maker. I really don't like this. I really don't like this distinction because it's not very precise. You have like professional level engineers who are calling themselves makers, but then you're also having hobbyists who are making like Warhammer 40K figurines and like other knickknacks who are calling themselves makers. And it's there's just no reverence to the discipline of engineering in this. And here's I guess here's how I think here's an improvement I think that we could make with this stuff. Like if you look on YouTube, you'll find a lot of people calling themselves makers who use, like, let's say 3D printers to make interesting solutions to stuff. And what I would say is someone who makes like a really like actual good solution. Like let's say someone makes a tool out of a 3D printed part, or, is able to engineer something useful. I wouldn't call them makers. I would call them engineers. Like you're doing something legitimate. You're doing something like that is high level, that is professional, that is, actually practical. Like if you're doing something practical, if you're doing something that requires like genuine effort and something that is necessary, a practical tool, something that is useful for something, even if it's simple, even if it's, something, that's just helping you, like you're still doing, fundamentally what you're doing is engineering. Engineering is something where you solve problems, and it's something practical. People like that should call themselves engineers. Now, yeah, you should call yourself an engineer. You shouldn't call yourself a maker. Like, call it what it is. Don't like lower yourself to some, that term. My problem with the term maker is that it essentially lumps hobbyists and engineers together, and hobbyists are not engineers. Hobbyists have some of the skills that engineers have, but people who are hobbyists, people who are, casual users of 3D printing or CAD or things like that, who do it for maybe aesthetic purposes or for knickknacks or for, just enjoy their own personal enjoyment, they're hobbyists. If you're doing something where you're making like a 3D printed frog or something like that, it's like that has no practical purpose. Like there's nothing that you can really do with that. It's not helpful. It doesn't do anything. You're a hobbyist. Now, there can be some practicality in it in terms of business. Like you can use your hobbyist skill of making little plastic knickknacks to make money, to sell your stupid knickknacks to people who don't know better. Great. But you're still a hobbyist. You're not an engineer. And the word maker, I don't know, maker is just, it's a loose term that, like the field of engineering, it's a field that is meant to be precise. Like you don't just throw things around. You do things for a purpose, and there can be like big variance. There's a human element. Like when you're designing, you don't just like design things perfectly. You design things based on heuristics. But there's still, you're still doing things to a degree of precision, to a degree of, professionalism. And that's what engineering is. It's practicality through like deliberate effort, practical solutions through deliberate effort. And if you're going to devalue it, if you're just going to say, oh, no, I'm a hobbyist. It's like, no, you're not a hobbyist. If you say you're a hobbyist, then you're devaluing the entire art of engineering. And here's a fundamental point, because we're talking semantics here, and semantics can be kind of annoying and whatever, but there's a place for semantics, but there's also a place for, not caring too much about words, but sometimes words tell you something deeper. So the deeper point here, I think, is that I don't think that people have. I think the sacred nature of the academy, of the arts, of becoming a master at something, a master at a practical craft, the significance of that has been completely lost, has been corporatized, and has been, devalued, and it's turned into something that used to be, like something laudable, something where there was honor in it. And now it's just it's a wacky, silly little fun thing that you do on the side, and it doesn't really matter. There's no real skill to it. Like, as a society, if you have a serious society, you need a society with a significant, value put into honor. What you should do, the people who run your society, the people who fuel it, who drive it, you need them to feel like what they're doing is important, because what they are doing is important. And if you don't ascribe honor to that, if you don't ascribe value and status, if it's just like, oh, you're just being a silly little nerd idiot, then what's the point? Why do anything? If you're going to call an engineer a hobbyist, which is what calling an engineer a maker is, or what an engineer calling themselves a maker, which is a self-defeating thing, that takes the honor out of something as important as engineering, which has fueled human civilization, has been the power arm of human civilization since the inception of engineering. Tools have been the way that power has been wielded for all successful human societies. If you don't have technology on your side, practical technology, which is engineering, then your society is weak. Your society loses. Your society starves. So engineering is one of the most, if not the most important discipline in society. And if you're going to take it, if you're going to just say, oh, it's a stupid pursuit, essentially it's trivial. It's a trivial pursuit that any idiot with any idiot nerd does. It's essentially equivalent to just making little figurines for yourself because you're a nerd who likes little nerd board games. There's no honor in that. It's just a self-masturbatory practice, essentially. It's like, oh, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing it for self-pleasure, just having fun with my own little toys. You're a little toy tinkerer. You're a hobbyist. That's not what an engineer is. That's not what an engineer is. An engineer is someone who is the power behind your society, the economic power, the person who designs the tools that make sure everyone gets fed, that solves the practical solutions, that is the one who, the blacksmith who makes the swords to defend yourself from the barbarian invaders. That is the engineer. It's not someone who just tinkers around making little trinkets. That's a hobbyist. There's no shame in being a hobbyist, but that's a diversion. It's something on the side. Or you're a businessman, who uses these little trinkets to make a little money. But and here's the fundamental point, because you could say, oh, you're just ranting and raving. It's like, how about this? This is indicative of a larger trend in our society, which is that honor has been forgotten, and significant significant meaning in how we pursue our lives has been thrown to the wayside. And here's a particular example which you guys have probably heard of at some point, but it bears repeating. They did an interview of the youths in China versus the youths in America for what's your ideal job? What's the ideal job for you? And the youths in America said influencer, YouTuber, a popular person online, essentially. And guess what the people in China said was their ideal job? They said astronaut. And I think it was followed by a bunch of other practical things, like probably doctor and scientist, maybe lawyer, things like that. And in America, it's like YouTuber, influencer, singer. Like, what is this indicative of? Well, number one, it's indicative of the fact that our culture is, well, you could argue it's a very feminized culture where the primary importance comes in social connections. And that's where, the value in our culture is because fundamentally you have to understand the difference between men and women in terms of what our primary focuses are. Women are like really, really, really good at networks, at connections, at understanding people and the nuances of people, like being able to read all the subtle facial like aspects of what someone, being able to read a person well, being able to know the significance of what's going on. Women are very good at that on average. And women are great at navigating through a sea of a social network, right? On average. And men, on the other hand, and so women care about people. Like, we've known this for forever. And if you deny it, then you're going up against like pretty well researched, well known psychological science and just common sense. And men, on the other hand, men are object-oriented. Men care primarily about things. Men care about, men are obsessed with things. Like a man, this is why like STEM fields are primarily male-dominated, because everything in STEM, like none of it is really about people until you get into like the corporate space and you get into projects and stuff. But none of it's really about people. All of it is about, these abstract objects that you want to figure out more things about, like thermodynamics. That's all just things. Like an equation is a little object, and just getting to understand what thermodynamics is, that's an entire object of itself. So you're understanding this little trinket, this little hidden box, and you're trying to understand what's inside of it. Whereas, which is why, a lot of women typically aren't drawn to this, because it's, the objects, the little things, like it doesn't really matter as much. So, but what you're seeing in our society is you're seeing, well, what you have been seeing over the last 50 years is the balance of power has shifted from, patriarchal to matriarchal. And you could say, oh, that's not true at all. It's not true. It's like, well, I think I'd say the artistic narratives that we've been putting out have basically been saying this for like 30 years. It seems to me like if you just look at the statistics, that seems to be obviously the case. Like, I think more women are graduating from college. Women, if you adjust for everything, they're actually making more money than men. Given the same situations, in the same job, with that, like if a woman's not pregnant, if adjusting for everything else, women actually make more. Like women are in terms of the economics, they have an advantage. Now, they're also way more depressed than men are. There's a lot of problems that I think they're facing today that needs to be solved. But from what I can see, and maybe this is the wrong way to kind of characterize this argument. seems like we've moved from a more patriarchal to matriarchal society, and our values have moved from more masculine to feminine values. And in doing so, the primary value, value structure within our society has shifted from, how would you say it? I guess masculine values, which traditionally was, object-oriented values, to feminine values, which is more network-oriented values, which is why you essentially see the ideal dream job of the young people in our generation is influencer, is YouTuber, because the value isn't really in what you do anymore. It's in your position in the network, which is important, but it's not the big thing. The big thing is what you can make out of it. So that's and I mean, I guess and here's the other thing, like China for women's rights, it's China versus America in terms of, female freedom, like China's way worse. So, and China is right now a much more masculine society than America is. So I feel like this could be the main cause of the discrepancies. Also, I guess China as a state, it's a much more serious actor than I think America is. I think it knows, it's more coherent with what it wants. Now, it's very dysfunctional, and quite frankly, the structure sucks, and it's stupid, but it's at least coherent. America, it's not coherent. America doesn't really know what it wants. America is kind of bumbling around and is kind of in the midst of the unraveling of its social system. But anyway, the point is that honor comes in a society, I think, where practical outcomes matter more than maybe the position in a network, potentially. I guess that's what I've been trying to say. But I'd also say, because if you care only about your position in a network, then the practicality in terms of what you're optimizing for and how you spend your time, it's not really necessary, right? Because if I make a cool little trinket, a person would be more willing to buy a cool little trinket that they can put on their mantelpiece than a tool. Because a tool would mean that you have to figure out how to use it. You're going to have to do something practical with it. But a trinket, it's a lot less labor intensive into what you do with it. It's just like a thing that you put on your mantelpiece. Which is maybe why materialist consumerism has been such a large thing, because you have a lot of excess wealth in America, which is why maybe people have been investing in Funko Pops and all these little toys, because, it gives the illusion of maybe purpose without the actual practical benefits of it. Practically what people should be doing is they should be, kind of fighting for survival, either in a physical way or in an abstract way. In an abstract way, you're fighting for the survival of your society. In a real way, you're fighting for, getting enough food on the table, making sure you have a house over your head, making sure that you can, increase your means. But today, I think people within our, very urbanized societies, they get everything they want. And, America's one of the richest nations in the world. Everyone here is pretty well off compared to the rest of the world. So, I feel like we're a little spoiled too. We don't really need a practical solutions because we already have the money. We already have the things. It's like, why would you work any more than you need to if there's no real incentive? What I've noticed, I'm doing a university program, which usually takes a year and a half or 2 years, and I'm doing it in 1 year. And I intentionally put this stressor on myself, which has been really hard to do, because, I want to push myself. And in pushing myself, I was able to do things that were like way outside of what I thought I was able to do. And I was able to, you know, get more efficient and get more practical because I had to, because it was forced out of me. And today it's not really forced out of you to be practical, because you already are kind of guaranteed some money or something like that, or, you know, a minimum standard. If you're kind of guaranteed what you already have and there's no major stressor, then you're kind of gonna, you know, you're gonna be accepting of mediocrity. And that's no way to live. We should be living according to the principles of honor. We should be trying to live up to the highest ideal we can. And fundamentally, I think the point that kind of underlines all of this entire discussion is this. We need honor in our society. In order to do that, we need ideals to look up to. And these ideals should be different ways of living, you know, different kind of archetypes, different, you know, modes of existence that have extreme honorable qualities to them and are understood by the general population as being, you know, highly sought after, highly important, and, you know, honorable and deserving of respect. And you have these archetypes. And if the archetypes are tuned correctly, if there's something that is actually like important and helpful and beneficial and good, then you can take via these archetypes, you can make a tremendous return in terms of your entire society. Because if you have great archetypes, then people will be, you know, incentivized to push themselves as hard as they can to fill into these ideals, to try their best to achieve these ideals. And by doing that, you know, instead of being a mediocre lump that just makes hobby toys, they're going to be making like the best things they could make. And in turn, they'll be pushing society, our understanding of the world and humanity and as a whole forward. And without that, if we're just tinkering around with little pieces of plastic, calling ourselves makers and whatever, then we're going to be stagnating. We're going to be wasting so much potential. So what we need is like for example, the archetype of a doctor. It's very well, I think, kind of laid out there. Like, doctors are respected. They're like, oh, you make a lot of money, and you spent all this time in school, so you're disciplined, and you're tough as nails. You're a doctor. You know, you go in there, you work on people's bodies, and you solve problems that are really hard to solve, and you save people's lives. It's like there's honor in that. There's tremendous honor in that. And people kind of know that. It's an archetype. It's not just oh, you're a doctor, whatever, you're a doctor. No, it's an archetype. There's an associated, you know, understanding collectively of society of how hard it is to do that, and, you know, the status that you get from achieving that thing that was very hard to do. And if you only have like a couple archetypes, then that's kind of terrible. It's like, what are the archetypes today? Doctor, scientist, maybe lawyer, businessman, YouTuber, or influencer, whatever. Like, that's pretty much, those are like the big ones. It's like okay, okay, like what's the like that's how many people are you leaving out? Like, what other things do you need to have done in society that you're just forgetting about? It's like if you don't have robust archetypes for like many of the important parts of society. Oh yeah, military member, that's another archetype. But if you don't have robust archetypes for every like important part of society that you need like ultra experts for, then your society is going to be mediocre and it's going to stagnate. And we need more great archetypes. And one of the big ones is engineers. Like engineers, I don't think we have very good archetypes. Like people don't even know what engineers do, which is insane because engineers are like the most important job that exists. Because without engineers, doctors don't have their scalpels. Military members don't have their rifles. You don't have your buildings. You don't have the car that you use to go to work. You don't have your house. You don't have your fork that you use to eat your food. You don't have the plow and the tractor that you use to make your food. You don't have a grid. You don't have a supply line. You don't have electricity. You don't have the internet. You don't have anything like that, of that if you don't have an engineer. And what we need is like an archetype that is like at the same level as a doctor, but for engineers. And it's not just like a scientist, because the thing is, like, you have like a scientist is a very well trod upon archetype. It's like, oh yeah, you're the scientist. You're pushing forward, theories, and you're like Albert Einstein, and you're doing crazy experiments. It's like, yeah, that's cool. It's like people know what a scientist is. They know the archetype and they think it's cool. But for engineers, I don't think as much. And right now, the archetype that's being built through social media is the archetype of the maker, which is some silly, stupid, idiot nerd who's making little figurines for his own personal pleasure, who all he cares about is some idiotic little trinket, which, to be fair, a lot of engineers are like that. A lot of engineers are just, they don't see the bigger picture because, well, that goes into a theory of intelligence that I have, but engineers, I think, on the whole, are mostly analytical thinkers, and I think you'll see in my podcast called the poet, the painter, and the philosopher. Engineers, I think, mostly fall into the philosopher category, which means that they're very analytical. And by analytical, I don't think they really see the full picture very well. And if they don't see the full picture, then they're not going to be able to really, well, they're going to have a very narrow and limited worldview. But still, some engineers, a lot of entrepreneurial engineers, who see the big picture. And I feel like engineers as a whole should try and create the archetype of very, practical, well-communicated, important, and fascinating engineering. Engineers should create like an archetype that is deserving of honor and respect. And if all the engineers that you see on like YouTube are people who are like designing little, figurines of frogs and boats and like just toys, it's like, well, your view of an engineer is going to be, oh, he's a little toy maker. It's like, I don't care about that. That's a stupid job, which it's not. But yeah, we need new archetypes. We need better archetypes. And, well, yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say on that. Let me think. I just want to make sure I've squeezed every last drop out of this idea. Engineers. Oh yeah, what other archetypes are there? You got engineers, you got chemists, you have maybe business people. Maybe you could have better archetypes for business people. Because right now the archetype for business people is like some ravenous hustler wolf person who, is detestable, and makes people just angry at them, who all they care about is themselves, which maybe, you have a lot of people like that. But we need an honorable archetype that is kind of the antithesis of that. Someone who's like, who's brilliant at solving problems and navigating, social, hierarchies, and is able to, who cares as much about the customer as they are about, themselves, and they want a good deal for themselves and the customer, who really wants to to provide for their needs. Like that's something honorable, and it needs to be something significant too. Like you need to have something where it's like the business people push forward the you know the economic might of our society, and without them, like we wouldn't have the coherent structures that we do. And then they're deserving of status. Same thing with engineers. Engineers fuel our society and solve the problems, and they do something incredibly difficult, and they solve problems that are like, seemingly impossible to solve. And I think you got to show people what engineers actually do. You got to show people what actually happens. Like people know what doctors do. People kind of know what business people do. People know what lawyers do, but we need to show people what engineers do too, like through film. There aren't really, like, if you look at it, there's like 4 engineering movies out there. There's like Apollo 13? I think that was a movie, or whatever that movie was called. Apollo 13. You got The Right Stuff. I guess you got maybe some anime. You got Hidden Figures. Stupid movie. Historical revisionism. Politically motivated historical revisionism. And the people who, gosh, you have to understand how people actually did math back then for Hidden Figures. Oh my gosh. You know how people did math? They didn't use computers. I mean, for some things they used computational systems, but a lot of how they did math was they got a bunch of women in a room, and then they just did a Euler's method of, of every single person does a very simple calculation, and then they just use 100 people to perform tons of simple calculations to get to a final result. That's how they did math. It's like those. And I mean, or maybe I'm not completely, maybe I'm misrepresenting things to an extent, but that's how you did the math. It's like, and if you're going to be saying oh no, they're the people who designed the entire Apollo program, it's like, no, they were doing the computations. They served an important part, but it's like anyway, forget it. We'll probably talk about Hidden Figures later, but anyway, I don't like historical revisionism. But the point is, you don't have very many engineering films. You have tons of films about lawyers. You have probably a lot of films about doctors. You have so many films about criminals and gangsters and all this other stuff. But you don't have films about engineers. Not really. You have a couple. You have tons of engineers about scientists, mathematicians. Not many about engineers. Probably Apollo, honestly, Apollo 13 is probably one of the only really, truly engineering-minded films that I've really seen. And there's only one part where, as they're flying to the moon, and then their CO2 filter breaks, you have a bunch of people. They said, okay, we need to build a thing that fits into this hole, a square thing that fits into this hole with the materials here. How do we do it? That's engineering. But it was only for 2 minutes, probably a 15-second clip. And then the guy says, okay, how do we do this? And then it cuts away, and then it cuts back, and then they have the thing. It's like, okay, here's how you do it. It's for 30 seconds of screen time, they showed something that was actually engineering. And then they cut away. and then that was it. That's probably the most faithful adaptation of something that's engineering based that I've seen in a popular movie. A movie that's actually worth watching. Then Evangelion. Evangelion is very good with engineering, I would say. Very good with engineering. Stylized and dramatized, and probably not, completely accurate, but does some engineering stuff. Also, Akira, uh, Japanese film. That's also very, doesn't really cover engineering, but in terms of the designs that they have, it's pretty well designed in terms of the engineering. Um, but yeah, not very many engineering films, not or any engineering films out there. Um, Ford versus Ferrari. That's an engineering film. Decent job there. Decent job. That's a good film. That's a great film. A great film. They did a good job. Good job of showing engineering. We need more films like that. More films like that don't even necessarily need to be real life. You could have a made up engineering scenario. Um, anyway, point is, other societies care about serious professions more than we do. And if you have one society whose collective will is oriented in a more practical direction as another society, if you have an entire society that cares more about something practical, something that meaningful than another society, I'd say that the practical society is probably going to do better in the long run. A practical society is probably going to be more powerful, or is going to be, more efficient, less wasteful. And it's not the only thing, right? I feel like China's not going to be they're going to be, somewhat of a superpower, but their population collapse is going to kill them off in terms of how competitive they are. So I mean, America has a buffer right now. America is kind of lucky. But if America keeps down this path of basically only building the archetypes of losers and not really caring about the practical people, not giving people a vision to look up to, then America's gonna fall into a little whimper. You need to give people a reason to do what they're doing. And it can't just be in terms of money, because engineers make money. But that's not it. If you don't have engineers, if you don't have people who are doing practical things, to have a reason to do that, then the results that you're going to get are going to be mediocre, because there's not really your heart won't be in it. If what you're doing is the most significant and meaningful and profound and deep and honorable thing that you can do, if you achieve actualization through your work, if it's something that is completes you as a person, which it should be, the crescendo, the opus, the thing that you work hard for, the thing that you give society. You're running with all your might, and then you're passing off the baton to the future, and that's your way of doing it. If you tell people that narrative, if you tell them how important it is, and if you give them a vision, a story to believe in, that they can live by, that they can map their own lives to, a vision, an ideal, then they'll be motivated to do what they need to do, and they'll make things that are far, far greater than anything they could have made without that vision. Truly. America was able to perform the most fascinating and astounding feat of engineering in all of human history through a single speech by John F. Kennedy. He said, we choose to go to the moon and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. I'm paraphrasing, I guess, but that's essentially what he said. He said that America, its strength comes from its willingness to venture into the unknown and to do the biggest challenge, to partake in the biggest challenge that we've ever, embarked on. And in doing so, we were able to achieve something truly magnificent. because we had a narrative. Kennedy, you know, put into the hearts of Americans a dream, a vision, an ideal. Like, this is what we do. This is where we're going. This is, we will achieve actualization through this project. We will show everyone that we are, we're Americans, and we're also, pushing forward the bounds of human will. And we were able to do that because we had a vision, because it was fit into a narrative framework, because we had the call to adventure, Kennedy's call to adventure. And then we did it. For a decade we worked on this project, and then we made it. So, I mean, humanity can decide to screw around and be mediocre and work on our little toys, and everything that we do only matters to us, and any job is as good as any other, and you can do whatever you want, and everything is as valuable as anything else, and it doesn't matter, everything is subjective. And we could go that route. And if enough of generations of humanity go that route, and we lose vision, we lose narrative, we lose focus, we don't really care, humanity will fall back into a pattern of stagnation. And I would say that if humanity does this for long enough, like, I think this could lead to humanity's end, like 100%. Like, this lack of vision, lack of narrative, lack of focus, this is something that is a stagnation effect. This will lead to our downfall. Because the constant in human history, I think, has been a drive to just stagnate. You've had some empires gain some prominence because their values, they said, oh, our values are great, or our government is great, or blah, blah, blah. And then they conquer. It's like, and then like, you conquer a land, like, what's your vision? It's like, oh, our vision is to conquer. It's like, there's no vision in that. It's just it's like a stupid narrative. It's like, they didn't control narrative. It was just based on their biological impulses. And everyone in that society probably just did things just to do them, right? Probably, I think the norm for most of human history has just been to just do whatever, and the narratives don't really matter. It's like, who cares? Who cares what you do? It's just like, you're this or you're that, whatever. Like, maybe you had some important archetypes like scribes, kings, warriors, but everyone else, I feel like they didn't really have much of a place, and who cared what they did? And their narratives were stupid. Like, even Alexander the Great, his narrative, oh, let's conquer the world. And then he conquered the world. And then he said, what did that quote? It's like Alexander wept because he had no more worlds to conquer. He looked upon his empire and wept because he had no more worlds to conquer. It's like, that was his narrative. It's like a stupid narrative. It's a fucking idiotic narrative. And what did that lead him? What did that give him? People remember him because he conquered stuff, but did he? What did he give to humanity? The only thing that is constant in humanity is our knowledge, to an extent. Like that's one of our superpowers. It's not who's in charge and who's this and who's. It's like, what have we learned? What have we been able to create? The only holdover from the ancient Egyptian civilizations, besides their echoes in our culture, are the pyramids. It's the art they've created. It's the creation is fundamentally it. And the way you create is with a narrative. You need a narrative, And at the end of the day, your life is also a narrative. You'll have a narrative, whatever, regardless of what you do. But and your life will adhere to a story, And your story could be a mediocre one where you just decided to, just kind of screw around and just work on little trinkets without really any reason. Or, you can control your narrative. You can say, I want to be the storyteller of my own fate. I want to live according to a greater narrative than just, the story of the human network of conquest, where everything is just a stupid little social, blip. The only thing that matters is your position in a social hierarchy. It's like, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all. The only purpose of a social hierarchy is to ensure that we communicate with each other better. Besides, the experience we get from connection with others. We connect with others because we talk with other people, we exchange ideas, and we become efficient that way. That's the value of a social structure. But if you start viewing the social structure as the end in and of itself, like, that's fallacious, that's flawed, you're living inside of a simulation when you do that. And I think fundamentally what we're learning in our modern society is there's really two options. I mean, we're learning so much, but one of the options is, you can either live inside of the simulation or you can live inside of, the actual, like, empirical reality. You can live in your porn, your video games, your movies. You can live in just, the kind of like American Psycho, a guy whose only value, the only thing he cares about is the social network that he's in and his status and, how he's perceived by his friends and this stuff. That's like, that is a life that maybe most people live, or many people live, or many people is the only thing they care about, the simulation. Because it's fundamentally what I mean by a simulation is, like, it's a projection of an underlying reality. It's not the underlying reality. The projection of the underlying reality is, the value system in a network. But that's not the reality. The reality is the network, is the communication of ideas, is the practical utilization of a network for a concrete and larger goal, such as, pushing forward human thought in the pursuit of truth, like a compelling narrative. That is something that is grounded in, like, epistemological reality. What is not is saying that the social networks are the ends in and of themselves, such as, I want to get all these friends just to have all these friends. It's like, you're masturbating if you're doing that. You're doing nothing. You're living inside of a fucking simulated reality. Your friends, they're there because, you care about them, but they're also there so that you can do great things, so that you can work together on a narrative, on an adventure. We need to go on adventures. It's not about some stupid fucking, I have friends to have friends. No, you have friends to go on adventures. You don't have friends to have friends. Like, and this is what warfare is, like ancient warfare. They viewed the social fucking value of a large empire as the end, What is an empire? An empire is a fucking socially constructed narrative. That's not even a narrative. It's like a socially constructed hierarchy. It's the surface level visualization of a complex network and a collective network of values and people who share the same values or homogenous or whatever. And the simulation is saying, oh yes, we need to ensure that this collective, this visual network gets bigger. It's saying that we need to expand the simulation. It's a simulation-based means. It's a simulation-based optima rather than a real optima. The real optima would be to say, how do we make it so that the network that we have, the productivity, the value that we provide to the world is magnified and we can give back more. That's real value. That is something real. What isn't real is if you say the value is that we get more powerful. Like, power, getting more powerful, it's not a value. That's nothing. That is simulated. Power doesn't help. Power, the only value of power, the only fucking value of power is if you use it for something great. If you have power to push forward a great story, a great narrative, something amazing. Like if you're working with power to do something, to go on an adventure with that power, that is how you use power. To get power for the sake of power, that is evil. That is simulation. That is falsehood. That is anti-truth. So simulations are getting more powerful in our reality because the visual interface of an underlying truth is getting more and more visceral, more and more powerful, more and more readily apparent and seeable. So the choice is going to get harder and harder to choose between practical reality and, some sort of imitation of reality. And it's like, anyway, the point is simulation, the way we visualize reality. It's important. We need to have it. We need to use it, but not as the end in and of itself, but rather as the means to get to an end. And the end is either created by us in terms of a narrative, or it comes from our values. What do our values necessitate the narrative to be? Or, that's it. Let's say if you're a Catholic, for example, your values dictate that you need to share the gospel, that you need to spread the word of Christ. That is your value. And it gives you a narrative. And it's like it's a compelling and important narrative. The narrative is like you need to share the gospel so that people avoid hell. I mean, that's the narrative. And you need narratives like that so that, you have meaning. And without meaning, you don't do much. You don't have really an effect on the world. You'll stagnate. Because most societies, I'd say, fell into simulation because simulation is powerful. And when you fall into simulation, you stagnate. Like if you look at Greek civilization, Roman civilization, Chinese civilization, which is very simulation-based. The Chinese civilization historically has been very insular. All they've really cared about is themselves, and they've viewed themselves as the center of the world. And in doing so, that's like hyper simulation based thought. It's like, all I care about is what's going on here because this is my entire world. And it's like, no, you're a part of the world. This isn't the world. The point is that like a small element of the world isn't the entire world. It's the picture of the world is the world. Well, not the picture of the world. The world is the world, not the picture, not the small element, not a little microcosm of it. So anyway, but you've seen in Chinese civilization, in Japanese civilization, in Roman and Greek, in African civilization, in Middle Eastern civilization, in American civilization, American native civilization, all of them have pretty much stagnated. All of them lived as, with their GDPs never really raised. They basically had a stable population. Nothing really, hundreds of years passed and very little things changed, Like slowly you got some improvements in armor and some improvements in masonry and how to do carpentry and other things like that. It's like you had slow improvements because some people were probably like very obsessed with these things and wanted to improve them, But it wasn't like it wasn't like a societal wide thing where people would learn and get better at things because people, all they really cared about is the simulation, the social connections. And well, they didn't really care about the practical results. They didn't care about pragmatism. They cared about just, I care about this mysticism, this superstition. I care about the stories as being everything. The little myth stories as being everything, rather than being a guiding a guiding beacon towards a greater ideal. And all of these societies stagnated. Their GDP stagnated, their population stagnated. And it was only until you had a society that valued the ideal and put the narrative at the center of everything, Christianity, where you saw an actual exponential increase in GDP, in standard of living, in population size, in basically everything we have today, in technology. It all happened after you saw the rise in Christianity. And you need to wonder, why is that? Because this is a historical fact. There's not really much else that really changed in the interim. It's all of these things happened within the last 2,000 years. And I would say it's undeniable that Christianity is a central influence. And I think that this fundamentally comes from not some arbitrary external phenomenon we developed Newton gave us some laws, and then we saw that we can model the reality. It's why did Newton come up with that? It's because he existed in a Christian framework that started looking at the world pragmatically and started saying, how do we understand the world at a deeper level so we can extract pragmatic information from knowledge, from mathematics, from science? How do we interface with God's creation and understand the truths behind it? Not by just, filling everything in with a God of the gaps, but by saying God created this stuff. Now it's our job to learn from it. This is Genesis. What is said in Genesis is God told Adam to name all the animals. That was his task, So the systematization of knowledge is one of the fundamental biblical concepts. So, this came from Christianity. Our modern world came from this. It's and if you say, well, no, what about other nations? What about China and India and the Middle East and all this stuff? Why are they better off too? It's because Western civilization, which was a Christian fundamentalist times 1,000 civilization for hundreds of years, conquered the entire world, spreading their values, spreading the implicit values, and spreading the technologies and all the progress that was made. So obviously the entire world went along with it because they were conquered. So anyway, point being, the word maker is stupid, and it's indicative of a deeper worrying sickness in our society, and we need a more compelling narrative and a more compelling reason and a meaning behind what we're doing. And we do that by the creation of ideals that come from places of virtue and truth. And if we have a framework like this, I think it'll be astounding what we're able to do. And I'd rather live in a world where we do the absolute best we can do rather than just doing an okay job. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I wanted this to be a 10-minute thing, but here we are at almost an hour. Anyway, please share this with some of your friends and your grandmother and other people. And email me at quantumsnov@gmail.com. I'm not going to be coming back to my social media accounts for a little bit as I finish up my grad school. So the only way that you can really contact me is through email. But I'm a little busy right now. But anyway, in the meantime, listen to my podcast, please. I'm trying my best to come up with some interesting, coherent thoughts that could answer some questions. And maybe they're wrong, but I feel like we should have a conversation about this stuff. But yeah, share this with your friend, with your former roommate who you haven't talked to in 7 years. Send this to him. Say, hey, check this out, bro. He's like Joe Rogan, but on Adderall. And then, text your ex. The ex you haven't gotten over. Say, hey, check out this guy Goosenov. Look at his podcast. And then, you know, your ex will be like, oh my gosh, wow, he's so caring. He's so sweet. He's given me such an amazing podcast. I'm going to give him a second chance. And that'll happen if you share my podcast with other people.